careful of those island boys. Little girl, use your head. They will tear you up like a paper toy. Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, no, no, no.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Rumbi.
Welcome to It's Layered.
We're in a long-distance friendship that started over 20 years ago when we were in high school.
We'll be talking about all things life, love, family, anything and everything else under the sun.
Delve deeper with us because in life, you know, Jine, my layers.
Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to It's Layered. Today, we have a really great topic on our hands and as a really special guest with us. We're going to be talking about motherhood. Amanda, I'm sure you're like taking notes.
I'm all ears. I'm taking notes. Ladies, take notes.
We're all taking notes. And I'm so excited to introduce Skhoe. Skhoe is a Zimbabwean professional and wife based in Geneva, Switzerland. She is a mother of two and she's a devout Christian. She's been mothering for 21 whole years. I met Skhoe through my sister, through church when I used to live in Johannesburg, South Africa. And so it's really an honor to have her on here. Welcome to It's Layered, Skhoe.
Thank you so much, Rumbi. Thank you, Amanda. It's such an honor to be here today.
Oh, we're so excited to have you. So when I saw I've been a mother for 21 years, right in your bio, I was just like, wow. And please tell us a little bit more about your family because if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to hear a little bit more about you and your family.
Thank you so much, Rumbi. You know that 21 years of motherhood always raises questions. You know, after that, the next question is, so Skhoe, how old are you? You know?
I was about to ask, but I don't want to be that person.
Yeah, and then I'm always like, I'm just aging gracefully. That's what matters, you know? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, I have two children. As Rumbi already said, I'm married and I have two children, a 21-year-old son. Ironically, he turned 21 yesterday. So yeah.
Oh, happy birthday!
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. And then I have a daughter. She's 16, turning 17 in January. So when I introduce myself, I say my youngest is 16, and people are like, "What? We thought she was 6."
No. You definitely look so youthful. I'm sitting here shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I left Zimbabwe in 2005 with my husband. Our son was 2 at that point. I'm giving you this background because it will be reflected later when I talk about mothering in general. Yes. So we left in 2005 when my son was 2 and we moved to Phuket and we stayed there for a few years. And already there are dynamics there when it comes to parenting. And then after a few years, we moved to South Africa, which is where our daughter was born. And we lived in South Africa for 10 years. And then we moved to Washington, D.C. So that's another dynamic. Now you are taking this Zimbabwean child born in South Africa and you are raising them in Washington, D.C., where they constantly say to you, in America, you know, this is how things are done. And then I'm like, no, when we close this door, my children, you are in Zimbabwe, forget about America.
These are borders. There's a border.
Yeah, so lived in America for 2 years and then moved back to South Africa. But at that point, I sent the children to boarding school in Swaziland.
Wow.
And then after 18 months in Swaziland, then I brought them to Geneva. And then now my son is studying in London. So that's how colorful the journey has been.
Wow. Like, I don't even know it's
Yeah, we did an episode last season on global citizenship and third culture kids. Yeah. And your kids are like the definition because they have experienced so many. Some people don't even travel to that many countries in their lifetime. And your kids have lived there. Yeah. So wow.
Absolutely. And I mean, I will say, Skhoe's children, I've met them. They are so well-mannered, well-rounded. Your daughter is so spunky. She's I love her personality. Like, it really shines. And to be able to do that, being in all these different spaces, hats off, kudos to, I don't know how you did it, Skhoe. And I hope we will get into how you managed to, you know, conceptualize motherhood in these different spaces. How has your journey been to motherhood? How would you describe it when you became a mom with your son, you said in Zim? Was it easy? Was it hard? Were you prepared? How would you describe that journey, you know, getting into motherhood, probably with your son, because he introduced you to motherhood? How was that?
Yes, thank you, Rumbi. I think with my first child, I would say it was relatively easier compared to when I had my second child. Okay. You know how we all have this support system. So when I had my son, my mom was literally with me for a whole month. Wow. You know, so she sort of ushered me into that journey. She was doing most of the mothering, you know, in the first few weeks, you know, whilst you're just there feeding the baby, but she makes sure the baby is clean, the baby's clothes are done, the baby is well fed. So that was sort of a good introduction to motherhood. But what I didn't realize was that my son had eczema, and I had never experienced eczema before. So my first question was, what's happening with his skin? And I didn't know, you know. And then when I took him for his 6 weeks checkup, I was told that I had to use a certain kind of cream, you know. So that bubble, you know, when you have just had a baby, you are so excited, everything is perfect. It's this little treasure, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, there's this skin thing that you can't take off, you know. So for me, that was where the first challenge really started. But I would still say, despite the challenge that I experienced with eczema, I still thought that that's a very special thing, a special relationship, you know, the type of unconditional love that you can't even explain or describe to anyone. And then I had my second child, a daughter, you know, like when you think you have this little doll that you dress up and you...
matching outfits.
Yeah. Exactly, you know, so all these nice, cute little things. And, you know, so with her, it was now in South Africa, you know, but South Africa being close to Zimbabwe, at least I had a lot of family around. I could get live-in help and that kind of thing. So it was sort of a smooth journey. And then I would say that things really started getting tough when the children started having their own opinions, you know, when they could talk, when they could tell you what works for them and what doesn't. And, you know, you're thinking, I'm the mom, I know what you should be doing, you know. So I would really say for motherhood, it's a very special thing. It's a very fulfilling journey, but I wish there was a script, you know. The fact that there is no script means that you have to do trial and error. You learn as you go. And the fact that you have had a child before doesn't mean that now you are fully prepared for the second one, because children have different personalities. What worked with the first child doesn't really work, you know, with the second one. So I would say that has been my journey. But what I didn't mention was that after my son had eczema, then at 18 months, discovered he was asthmatic. So he had his first stint, you know, in the emergency or hospitalization, maybe for a whole week. And as a young mom, that was devastating for me, because when your child falls really sick for the first time, you're thinking they're dead, you know. And and so that's how it's been. But I would say it's really been a fulfilling journey.
That's wonderful. You know, you mentioned finding out your son had eczema. My mom, when she just had me, I was a baby, they discovered my sister had retinoblastoma, cancer of the eye. And she said that was she was so nervous. And my sister, being my sister, was like, Mommy, don't worry, I'm not going to die. And I think that, as you say, like, being you're expecting, oh, it's joyful, it's blissful, and then this thing that is dropped on your lap, you're like, what am I supposed to do with that? It's really interesting to hear that. And I don't know, Amanda, if you want to share your journey to motherhood, you know, and how that was for you as well.
Yeah, I think one thing I caught on before I forget my train of thought, because this happens to me a lot, was also the covering that your mother offered, like in that first month. And like for me, my mom has passed away, my own mom has passed away. So and a cousin of mine come from Zim to help me for 3 months. And I cannot sing her praises enough, because you just that covering, well, whilst you're healing, whilst you're getting used to things, especially when they're a mother as well, and they're imparting their wisdom in a gentle way. It's such a special time that's hard to describe, but necessary. So support network is a huge consideration. I think it's much bigger than people say or tell you, that you need other women to step in and lift you up at that time, because you don't know, as Ruby said, you get this thing and you're like, okay, I've been carrying you in my tummy for 9 months. Now what? So I just wanted to say that. My own journey was I'm away from home. So I guess for me, everything, it felt the support system in terms of the hospitals and stuff in Australia is very good. So I felt like I had that. But I did feel a bit of disconnect being a Black woman in a predominantly white society, because I was like, what if when I give birth, they're looking at me and they're like, we've never seen a lady like this. I just thought, so it was very important that I made my own village. The doctor I chose, I knew she had done work in Africa before. So she had seen a Black person before. It wasn't like I was a guinea pig, and I would have to say, after hearing all the horror stories of birth stories, and that I had a smooth sailing in terms of my birth story, but I think, again, that's also another thing you can't predict. Even if you have 5 children, every pregnancy will be different. Every birth story will be different. So, yeah, it's unique, I think. And I think people think, oh, it's a blanket thing, it's all the same. But no, every journey is very, very different. So I'm very glad and grateful you shared yours, because I can imagine the first time in the ER would have been so scary. Do you think you had a plan though, heading into motherhood, like before your son was born? Were you like, I'm gonna be this type of mom, I'm gonna do this? Or did you just always learn as you go?
Yeah, I would say I really didn't have a plan, or if I had one, I don't remember it.
She's like, out the window.
I don't really remember the plan, because like in our Zimbabwean context, there is my husband's family and there is my family, and the two families really influence how you parent your children. So although I had a certain idea of how I wanted things done, there's certain things that I learned from my husband's side of the family, that for our babies, this is what we do, And then you all of a sudden realize, oh, okay, so there are other plans that I have to align with mine, and that kind of thing.
That's very interesting.
So for the most, it's really been learning as I go. I was just laughing the other day. I was telling someone that after I had my son, I thought I knew about babies. And then when my daughter was born, and then the first day, because I was supposed to bath her, all of a sudden I couldn't remember what I was supposed to do. And then and then I rang the bell, and one of the nurses came. I said, can you help me bath the baby? Because I look at that point, I looked very tiny, 16 years ago. And she said, oh, poor little thing, let me help you. And then afterwards, she said, oh, your firstborn. And then I said, second one. And the nurse was really angry. And she just said, and she walked away.
Wow.
Wow. That is...
Yeah, so the point is, even if you have done it the first time, the second time, there's still variations, or maybe your mind still thinks, I'm not confident enough to do certain things and I still need help. So the thing is, you will never get to a point where you say, I'm 100% confident I can walk this journey alone. So the village that you talk about, Amanda, you will still need it when you have your second child, if that's what you decide to do.
Yeah. And I find what you're talking about, a lot of women have said, each pregnancy, it's almost like it can be traumatic, going through pregnancy and childbirth. And I think we lock it away in a part of our brain. And then people expect us to just go back and access it, but because it can have a bit of trauma around it, you completely forget. You know, I also have another friend of mine who's just given birth to their second one, and she's like, I'm also relearning as if I'm a new mom. So it's quite interesting that you mentioned that.
It really is. And I think also something you brought up was thinking about there's different way to parent, like, you know, not being stuck in your head, like there's only one way, and being open to a different way to parent, which is very interesting. We don't really hear that very often. Would you say that your parenting journey hasn't been as maybe anxiety inducing or stressful because you didn't go with a set, this is how it's supposed to be? Did that help you? So I just wanted to ask that, because I'm saying I'm curious to know if you think it made it easier to accept parenting as you went, as opposed to if you had an idea that it has to look like this and I have to do it like this. Do you think it helped you manage parenting a bit better?
Yeah, I think you're talking about being open-minded and being flexible. Yes, I think it has helped me to a certain extent, because if I had worked with a template, I would have realized that this template doesn't work, you know, because I feel that sometimes when you have this certain idea of how it works, before you have the child, you are planning for a human being that you haven't seen, and you don't know the child that you're going to be given. What if they don't fit into that script that you have? And then the advice that we get from the aunties and the parents, they have parented different children, but not your specific child. You know what I mean? So the ideas they give, you can choose which ones work for you and which ones don't, you know, but there is no set way, you know. So I always encourage all new mothers to say, just go into it with an open mind, discover things as you go along. I think Rumbi is a newlywed, if I may say, it's the same with marriage, you know, like sometimes people say, oh, men want to be treated like this. And you should ask, have you been married to this particular man before for you to know how he should be treated?
Do you know my husband?
The same with kids, you know?
It's true. You're so right. So given that, I love that perspective. Thank you so much for sharing that. How would you measure success as a parent for you now? Like, what does that look like for you?
I think for me, it's raising rounded kids. Like you mentioned that, Rumbi, like children that have been everywhere, literally. Like my mother says, when I think of your kids, I just imagine them carrying suitcases. So after carrying suitcases for so many years, to come out as a rounded individual. And the question that I'm sure most people want to ask is, how do you define roundedness? You know, like being grounded, having values that really set you up for success, respecting yourself, you know, respecting the community around you. And for me as a Christian, you know, my children's relationship with God also is very important in terms of how I measure my success as a mother. And then academic success, of course, as a Zimbabwean, you know, like our parents taught us, just go to school, get the good grades, have a good life, you know. So for me, that's also very important. My children's ability to plan their lives, decide what they want, and work towards the future that they want. You know, so it's really centered around what I consider very important in my life. And some of it, I think, is also influenced by how my parents raised me. Like my father used to laugh whenever I would sit and say I'm studying, and then he would come an hour later and he would find me fast asleep. And then he would say, Skhoe, do you know 20 years from now, people will ask me, what happened to your daughter? And can you imagine when I say to them, oh, Skhoe is working in Marlborough as a maid, how will that feel? You know? So for me, not that there's anything wrong with that but that's how he rubbed it in to say, you have to work hard. Things will not just come to you. So that's the same way that I'm raising my kids, to say in this life, you have to go for what you want and really work hard for it.
Yeah, it's so funny you talk about our parents. I think I've experienced that too, where it's like now you see your parents in a different light when you become a parent yourself. You're like, oh, that's why they used to do, you know what I mean? Like, it's not just them being cruel or them being, it's, you actually start to understand. I think you almost look back on your own childhood when you're now imparting or starting a childhood with someone else, where do you think personally, if you want to share, you align or you differ from your own parents when it comes to parenting? Especially because Zimbabwean parents of that generation, we always joke, me and Rumbi, that they're the same. They're the same. It doesn't matter. We all, so where do you think you align or differ from them?
I would say to a very large extent, the issue of discipline and respecting other people. I think I align with my parents, but the method of discipline may be slightly different because I come from that generation that didn't spare the rod.
Yeah.
We were just spanked left, right, and center, and we considered it normal. But then for the children in this current setup, I cannot use that type of parenting. So I've had to find other ways of disciplining and withdrawing privileges, that kind of thing. But in terms of, a spirit of Ubuntu, what you call Unu in Shona, that's really grounded in the way that I was raised. And also just being useful around the house. That's one thing that I always encourage my children to do. They have a lot of conveniences, dishwasher, washing machine, but I always make sure that as a Zimbabwean child, you should have an idea of how to do the dishes, or at least wash your socks using your hands, you know what I mean? Because children nowadays just throw everything in the washing machine, including their sneakers that, I say I use that machine to wash my white shirts and dresses, and you put your sneakers there, so it doesn't work for me, So,
no. No.
Yeah, and the thing is with life, I always say we never know where our children will end. We give them the best that we can, but we don't know. What if one day you get a job in South Sudan where you have no access to a dishwasher or a washing machine? You will spend all your money trying to look for the nearest laundromat or whatever. And I always say that can't be life. So for me, I would say my parenting style has been a combination of what I got from my parents and then fusing in with the latest or the modern ways of parenting. And, like, for example, my parents would wake us up at 5 a.m., you do chores and things like that. But for these children, I can't wake them up at 4, because they'll say, I will just vacuum clean this house in 30 minutes. Why am I waking up at 4? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just balancing, taking the good from the past, merging with the good from this current generation. But I would say where it gets really difficult is raising the girl child, because our parents had a certain notion of what it means to be a girl, what's acceptable in your community. So I would get comments like, what kind of woman is this girl, like referring to my daughter? And my response is always, she's not a woman, she's a child. She's a girl. You know what I mean?
Please repeat that again. Yes.
Yeah. Like when people say it in, like when you say it in English, maybe it doesn't sound as coarse when they say what kind of woman. But when you say it in the way like, akaita say, and I say you can't talk about a 10-year-old and say akaita say. She's not a mukadzi, she's a child. And I think with what Rumbi referred to earlier, the problem of child marriages and that kind of thing that we have in our country, we should allow children to be children.
Yes.
And not sort of raise them as these women before they are women. It's as if we are grooming them for marriage before they are ready. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I feel that sometimes when people see your children like they haven't seen them in whatever years, like after COVID, you go home and everyone is like, oh, your son is all grown up. Very soon we'll have Murora, or very soon we'll have Mkwasha. I'm like, why are we so quick to go that direction? Why don't you just appreciate them for who they are for now, what they are doing at school and that kind of thing? You can't always try to link the lives to marriage, whatever, and so
there's more to us than marriage. There's more to us than marriage.
Yeah.
You're preaching, Skhoe. I'm here.
Yes. I know. We're like, and especially because we've spoken about gender roles before, it's so inspiring to hear you speak about you teaching your son as well that he needs to wash his socks and do the dishes. Because I think as well, sometimes that happens in Zimbabwean homes is then the woman or the girl child has to do all those things, but the boy can sit and relax, because he's going to get a murora, a wife one day, and it's inspiring to hear you you being able to fuse the two together in your home.
Absolutely. And to show that it can be done. As I've said, you know, meeting your children, being around your family, just the energy you have as a family, and your children. And also I love your relationship with your husband, and you seem very zen, very at peace with the person you are and the mother you are, the wife you are. Would you say you are at peace with your perspective and how you mother, the type of mother you are? I'm saying obviously what I see from outside, you know, it can always be different, but would you say that you are at peace with the mother you are, as you've explained, fusing these two different perspectives into how you parent your children?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question, to be honest. You know, I would say I'm at peace, yes, but there are certain times when I'm not sure how my children feel about my mothering style. You know what I mean? It's about what I think is best for them, but it gets very challenging, you know, when you raise African children in Europe, for example. If I look at our Switzerland context, like summer comes up and my daughter wants to wear these shorts, you know, not shorts, short shorts. And I'm thinking, you can't wear these short shorts outside the house, you know. And she sort of understands that, okay, my mom wants it this way. But then there are times when she feels like she's trapped in this whole Zimbabwean way of life and seeing things, and she's thinking she's never lived there even, but why am I being forced into this?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So
living by that standard when I'm not there.
So there are times when I'm not sure, like when I think, have I denied them an opportunity to really be open-minded and say, these short shorts mean nothing, let me just go with my friends, you know, because half the time she may feel that she's overdressed because she's in jeans, it's summer and everyone is in these shorts. And, you know, so as much as I am content from a values perspective, there are times when I feel perhaps I'm a bit too tough, maybe I should relax things a bit, you know. And having grown up being told you have to be in the house by 6, and in the summer here, the sun sets at 10. Who wants to be in the house at 6? But how do I call my mother at 10 o'clock and say my daughter is out?
You
know what I mean? So there are those things where you are not sure whether by really molding them in this way, you are denying them a chance to fully experience the world that they are living in, if you know what I mean. I don't know you, Amanda, being outside, and really for you to a certain extent, I know you had an opportunity to live on your own before you got married.
Yes.
Do you feel that being out at 10 p.m. and, you know?
I think, sorry, I will, and then Amanda, you can fill in there. But I think I completely relate. It's like the way we were raised, there's always another voice that goes with you. It's sitting on your shoulder, where you have the liberty. Nobody is judging you. Nobody knows what you're doing. No, if that makes sense, but you still have this sort of, but. So I guess it boils down to values. You're raised with certain values that will be with you. And I guess that's why children are raised with values, right? Because you hope they carry it. It's just a question of, does it serve me now? And does it serve me in this environment that I am in? And that is now having to make the decision for myself. And I've struggled with different things, different aspects. And even my husband has been like, you know, if no one's looking, I don't judge you for X. But you feel it because you've been raised with it. And now it's truly having to sit with yourself and say, who is Rumbi, separate to anybody else's, whether it's the upbringing, whether it is the environment I'm in, which is away from home, without any expectations from anyone else. Who is Rumbi and what is her decision in this moment? And it's hard. So I completely relate. I don't know about you, how you feel.
No, you ladies are saying it all. It is very tough because I find I even have the added layer, my child is biracial. So obviously that's also another thing for me, I feel, because he's going to be a Black man in the world as well. You know what I mean? And sometimes I think to myself, if I make him, or like the example you brought up with your daughter and the shorts, sorry, you're going to go on about the shorts, but like the reason you protected her is because she's not always going to be in a space where people understand the shorts are shorts. You know, there's going to be some spaces where they're like, You know, if she walks down Harare, you know, 4th Avenue, 5th Avenue, they'll be like, hey, sister, you know, and she's a young girl, but they will catcall. They will. Yes. So she needs to understand, okay, I'm going to that space. Let me wear this. And it's sad that we even have to do that. But you want her to have that discernment where she can judge and see. So yeah, maybe in Geneva in the summertime, going out with her friends for ice cream, it's okay if she wears shorts, but she also needs to know there are going to be some spaces where unfortunately it's not so open, it's not so free,
and it's a safety issue as well.
It's a safety issue. It's a, you know, so I think what you're doing is, it might seem tough now, or might seem like, oh, am I blocking her now? But you're actually doing her you're doing her a favor. It sounds bad, but because she'll learn, like, oh, okay, you know, there's spaces and places to do these things. And I think that's where I also, even though it's only been months, I constantly think about that. Like, you know, like in Australia, you can do whatever you want, but I can't raise a child who thinks they can do whatever they want everywhere they are, because when I take him to Zimbabwe, it's not going to be like that. You know, when I take him to Zimbabwe and we're serving food, he's not going to be the first one to rush and just serve himself. He has to wait for his elders and things like that. And I think they learn that from the home first before they do it outside. So it's always hard. And Rumbi has brought this up, that we're always balancing all these voices, all these thoughts, and thinking of the future and this, or not, if my mom was here, if my dad was here, what would I do? And like, sometimes we get so lost in our thoughts, and to speak to what you said, we then forget to experience, you know, because we're so, but what do you do? What do you honestly do?
I think what Rumbi just said about my children, I would say that's really encouraging, because sometimes you're not sure whether you're doing the right thing or not. But when you get feedback from people, you then realize, oh, actually, I'm not so bad after all. So last July, we went home for the first time after we left. We were last in Zimbabwe, December 2018. So it was 3.5 years. And we went, and everybody felt the children had grown physically, but in terms of who they are, they felt they were still the same. There is nothing like they're coming from Europe. They're very respectful. They were really trying to speak broken Ndebele and that kind of thing. You know, so I felt, okay. And people were even telling me that, oh, your children are so respectful. They are so grounded. And, you know, so I thought, oh, okay. So
I'm doing it. And you know, the other thing, I'm not a mom, but I am a teacher and I have students, right? And you want to do the best for them, but you also want them to like you. So sometimes when you're like, no, you can't do that, they look at you like you're destroying their life, but you're like, I'm doing this
kill
for you.
Kill joy, Rumbi.
You also want them to feel like, oh, I like it. So in moments where a student comes and hugs me, or like is excited to see me, or says, thank you so much, Rumbi, for the lesson, or like it's, you know, sometimes it can be few and far between, but like those moments make you feel like, okay, I'm not really terrible after all. I'm trying to do the best for them. So I think people don't realize, I would assume, that also as a parent or mother, you also want your children to like you, aside from loving you and seeing you as a mother. That's how I feel. I don't know, but I would assume.
Yeah, that's very true. There's one thing that I just wanted to mention, Amanda, about raising your children in the diaspora. For me, the language issue, that's one thing where I feel I have totally failed. I don't even know how I failed, but my son at least speaks a bit of Ndebele, or he understands everything. He tries to speak here and there. With my daughter, you can just near her and she will never know what she can say.
She's just like...
she's like, what's that, you know? And I asked myself, like, two whole Ndebele parents, how did we end up here? And that's one thing that I can't explain. And that's one of my greatest regrets. You know, like, I talk about the values, being grounded and being able to go back home, fit in, talk with their cousins. But the fact that they can't converse in Ndebele, I find that sometimes it denies them the opportunity to fully experience Zimbabwe when we go, you know. So that's one thing that I wish I could correct if I had an opportunity. And the thing is, as children grow older as well, there's this desire to really reconnect with their roots. Who am I? When I say I'm Zimbabwean, what are some of the things that really like define my Zimbabwean? And I find that with my son, he's really trying with his Ndebele. He's listening to South African music. He's picking slang here and there. He's asking me things, but what he's picking is street lingo, and I'm like, that's not Ndebele. And he really thinks he's trying, and I'm like, so that's something that one has to constantly, you wonder at this point at 21, should I be trying to teach this child Ndebele or just say Ndebele won't take him to heaven, let him be?
Yeah. I think because your son already is showing interest in it, that could be something you guys just do, you know. Why not? If he's already showing interest, there's a love for it. And I think also because I'm a piano and all this stuff is like super cool at the moment.
Yeah.
Why don't you just write the waves, Skhoe? Just write it and teach him, Because for us, when we were growing up, we were told like to be as English as you can. You know, it was almost like, and now sometimes I regret that in terms of, you think, no, we should be rooted in, if we can, we should be rooted in our language and our culture.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's done a turnaround and he's keen, I think just pick up the Ndebele lessons. Why not?
Yeah. And what do you say, Amanda, about this thing, like our parents coming out of this post-colonial era, for them, a measure of success, a very smart kid was somebody who could communicate, very well in English. So for some of us, we thought one day when I have my own kids,
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And also you want them to fit in, sorry, Rimbi, you want them to fit in all these countries you mentioned. English is key. So they couldn't just go with Ndebele. They would have then felt like,
and in the same breath too, you were working hard raising children outside of home. You have so many things you're trying to balance and manage that you would never have to manage when you're home in the home territory. Even language learning. My parents didn't sit down with me and be like, Hande, let's learn Shona or let's learn. And to this day, I don't speak Ndebele. My dad didn't sit us down. He wasn't sitting us down and being like, let's talk in Ndebele. And the schools they sent us to, they taught Shona. So I learned Shona. Do you get what I'm saying? So they could take it for granted that I could learn the language at school, the environment. But when you're not at home, you're dealing with all other aspects and dynamics of, whether it's administrations with visas and whatnot, or like making sure it's a completely, so you need to, I think, give yourself a bit of grace.
Yes,
to understand that there's only so much you can do as one person.
Yeah, and you gave your kids so much experiences and other things, language will come around at some point.
Yeah, that's my hope.
Yeah. Do you ever feel mum guilt? Have you ever been mum shamed, especially as someone who has lived in other spaces that are not Zimbabwe, or raised your kids in other spaces, that you're not doing the right thing? I think you mentioned when you're in America, that's a whole different ball game. Did you get some mum shaming or feel any mum guilt? And if so, how did you cope?
Yeah, I would say I felt the mum shaming a lot in America, when people have certain ideas like of how your child should be behaving, and even their physical looks. I remember my daughter was a bit on the smaller side, and there were people who would say, oh, why is she so tiny? And I'm like, I'm not God. I mean, how do I explain that? But there is this insinuation that perhaps she's not eating well, or that, you're not doing your everything as a mother. Why is your son so skinny? Those kinds of questions. And I felt really, and I constantly had to explain myself, or just, so that's the space that I felt it. And then in terms of mom guilt, of course, you feel it, when you think, am I doing enough? How should I have responded to this situation? Have I given my children the best? I think I have felt it, especially as I try to balance my professional career. Like in the first few years, when you're really trying to build yourself up, and then you have children that you have to take care of. So I felt that I was more focused on my career and I wasn't really there for the kids. But one moment that I remember that really hit hard was when my daughter was in grade 2 or something, and I was looking through their school yearbook, and then I saw they had featured her in cute little quotes. And they asked her, why was your homework not signed? And she said, because my brother doesn't have a signature. And the teachers thought, oh, this is so cute. And for me, I thought, this is not cute. Your brother shouldn't be signing your homework. Where am I? That's when it started to hit me that perhaps I'm not really there for her. And she now looks up to her brother to say, will you please help? But the brother didn't have a signature, you know. So that was really a light bulb moment for me where I said, in this journey of motherhood, have I really done my best? Have I failed my kids? And I would say for my son as well, he had his own share of challenges where homework was unsigned, I was traveling and that kind of thing, you know. So I got to a point where I said, God, I think I need a break. I need to refocus, you know. I have gotten this side right, but this other side, I feel there are things that are lacking. I don't even know what my children are eating. I have entrusted this to another person. I trust them, of course, but they are not the mother, you know what I mean? So I have, you know, so when we moved to the US, that was the moment for me when I thought, this is my answer to reset. And even as I did that reset, I had this whole grand plan of how I was going to instill order. I was going to make sure people eat right. I wasn't in a rush to get a job. I was just going to be a mother, be a wife, and you know, so to a certain extent, I felt I was dealing with that guilt. But of course, after 2 months, I mean, the children have their lives, the husband is settled at work, and then I'm like, what am I doing with my life?
Like, you bring up such an interesting perspective, because I think our parents' generation, you know, I think mothers, it was so normal for mothers to make their lives about the family and children to such an extent. And then when the nest gets empty, that empty nest syndrome, it hits especially mothers very, very hard, because I think they were raised at a time where it was like you sacrifice for the children. And I think seeing and witnessing that, we're like, I would still like to be myself and still have a profession. And then obviously, as you've explained, that comes with its own set of challenges that come with that. So it's such an interesting thing to navigate. And I know you're still with, you know, Jerome at home, but how do you balance that, and even how long are you home with him? How long do you know, all those decisions? How did you?
I think for me right now, I'm still in the thick of it, because I'm deciding how often when I start going to work again, how often I'm gonna start going, what that's gonna do for my career, because I felt like I've really fought hard for my career to get to where I am, and then now I'm like, I don't want to be left behind. but I feel like also society almost rules out women when we do have kids, you know. I sometimes think when I'm not in a meeting, like, are they just looking, oh, Amanda's at home with the kid, like, as in now they just assume. You know, you're an afterthought, you know. They're gonna even when I go back to work, is it gonna be a welcoming space, or are they just gonna box me and put me in a corner somewhere, you know? Oh, she's just a mom, you know. So it's all these things that women, I think, we face that no one can give you a template for. And I think maybe even in some ways even more than our own mothers experience, because we do want to be more career driven in some ways, and then now it's like how to balance the two, you know. For you were like, you had a reset and you felt, but even then after 2 months you're like you know. So exactly. It's so tough, because our world is constantly changing, and I think each generation things change, so the parenting also changes, and the style of parenting changes. So and I'm keen to see how I'm going to balance it. I'm going to have to get back to you, Rumbi.
And I think also society has this idea of what a mother should look like. My friend, I visited a friend last night actually, and we watched an episode of Working Moms. It's a show on Netflix, and they're obviously trying to tackle the issue of, you know, moms going back to work, working, and all that kind of thing. And you really realize society has an idea of what mothers should be, or a working woman should be. It's very hard for society to bring and bridge the gap of the two. We can't seem to understand that. But I also wanted to ask you, Skhoe, you mentioned something about when you were in DC, and then when you were home, you're like, in my home, it's Zimbabwe. It's not Washington. It's not America. And it piqued a thought in my head, and I thought I'd save it for this question, which is, how important is it for your children to be tied to their Zimbabwean roots? And as you mentioned that example, I thought maybe she's preparing them for when they are going to have to go back home and visit, so there's no shock factor, like, oh, what is this place and why is it so different? So how important is it for you that they are tied to their roots, and how do you instill that in other ways aside from some of the things we've talked about?
The answer is I don't know, really.
I love that answer. It's honest. Yes.
Yeah, because for me, I feel like identity plays a huge part in terms of how you navigate life, how you view life, and that kind of thing. So it's very important for me that they have that connection to Zimbabwe, that they understand the culture, they understand their people, they understand the value system, what's really important to us as Zimbabweans, the spirit of Ubuntu that I talk about. Yes. So I think that's very important, the importance of hard work and all that. But at the same time, I feel that for children that are living in this global village, they shouldn't be too tied to Zimbabwe such that they can't fully experience what this global village has to offer. I have a friend of mine who is American, Jamaican, married to a Zimbabwean. And I asked a question a few years ago. I said, are you raising your children as Americans or as Zimbabweans? And she said to me, I'm raising them for eternity. Shona is not going to take them to heaven. And for me, I thought this was really profound. And I've sort of aligned myself to that kind of thinking to say, what is it that these children need to thrive in this world? Is the Zimbabweanness what will propel them for success? And the question is yes or no, like they pick and choose what's there from their being Zimbabwean and then mix with what they're getting at the other side. But in terms of the value system, the spirit of Ubuntu, that for me is very important. I would want them to go to Bulawayo and not be lost. They should know, like, so last year in July, we went home, and for the first time, I said I wanted them to experience Zimbabwe from a tourist perspective, because the Zimbabwe that they see in the media, where there is poverty, where there is suffering, everyone is gray, people look sickly. I said, that's not the Zimbabwe that I want you to know, because when you have that mindset or picture of Zimbabwe, you'll never love it and you'll never want to be associated with it. So I said, I want to show you a different kind of Zimbabwe. So we went there, stayed in a very nice place where they had Wi-Fi, unlimited, that's how this generation works.
Yeah.
And then I
What's
said,
the Wi-Fi code? Yeah.
Yeah, so I will take you to these all these nice places so that you can appreciate Zimbabwe's beauty and what it has to offer. Take them out for breakfast at Food Lovers, because they're thinking if you're in Bulawayo, you're just eating pap and chomolia. And I'm saying that's not all. This is not all, and then after we were there for 2 weeks. After that, my son said, actually, I could come and live here.
Aww.
And I thought, okay, that's something. So he knows that this is an option that he has. Because the fear that we have as parents that are raising children abroad is if one day, for some reason, my child had to go back and live in them, where do they even start?
Yes.
Would they survive?
Can they even survive? But the fact that he said, I could actually come back, So this summer, I said, okay, you guys are ready to get your licenses. The two of you, I'm shipping you to Zim for 6 weeks. Just go there, the two of you figure things out, and, and we'll see after that experience whether they really, So I don't know whether I answered your question, Ruby. It's a long-winded way, but it's just trying to say it's important to remain connected, but not to be stuck in that kind of, appreciate the beauty, what Zimbabwe gives you in terms of molding your character into a full global citizen.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you said it beautifully, so beautifully. And for you, Am, how important is it for little Jerome to be tied to?
Well, you tell me if I pass the test in 2 years' time. But it is important to me. And I think also I don't want to have, similar to Skhoe, I don't want to have a pity party. Yeah. Like poverty exists everywhere. And I think all of us now understand, even in these established countries, there's always that poor neighborhood. There's always that. So it's not like, I don't want him to just think Africa is equal to, or even if we're sending stuff home, I don't want it to come from poverty space.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to still be like, you know, I have more than enough I can give. You know, being a global citizen, having Ubuntu, you know, if I can help, I should assist, but not like with that poverty undertone, or savior undertone.
Yes.
You know, so I think for me that's what I hope I impart, because I think it is important to have those ties, but it's definitely important to also operate in the world we're now living in. And I think language is a big one. And my son is also German, so we're trying to teach him German. So there's too many cultures going
You
on.
learn everything.
Good luck. Good luck.
But good luck to me. We'll have to do this episode in 10 years' time and see where we're going. But all to say that I do think if you can pick and choose, why not? You know, like if you want the Ubuntu, but you don't want certain aspects, like, you know, girl child, don't go to school or whatever it is that sometimes in Zimbabwe you find, it's our kids these days, I think, because of social media and everything, are they got much more information on hand than we realize. So I think sometimes you do have to give them autonomy to make their own decisions and hope that the way you've parented them is enough to propel them to make their own decision and realize, okay, you know, this works here and this doesn't work there. And I think the 6 weeks will be keen to find out when they come back, how they survived.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, this has been such a beautiful episode, and we can go on and on. Motherhood is so layered, and in no way, shape, or form can we finish it in one episode. But we are so grateful for your time, Skhoe. We're so grateful for your energy, your presence. It was amazing to talk about motherhood with you. Are there any causes or projects that you are, you know, currently involved in that you'd want to share on our platform?
Nothing very active, but I would say that I'm passionate about ensuring that the girl child has equal opportunities, you know, like as much as what the boy gets. So at a family level, I'm supporting a few girls to go through high school. So that's what I'm doing, because I feel that there's so many girls out there with a lot of potential. There are girls even that I learned with that were very smart, but because they didn't get the opportunities that I got, their lives turned out differently. So I would really want to ensure that the girls that are in my immediate sphere of influence, you know, they really get to achieve the most in life.
It's so beautiful. And honestly, thank you. This has been so heartwarming to hear you talk about this. I think we may come back to you, Skhoe, like, you know, down the line and be like, any notes?
Especially raising these kids in these diaspora streets.
Yeah, you have the experience, as you rightly said, like all the countries we've been to with your family. Thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. Thank you so much for your time and for being so open and sharing. We truly, truly appreciate everything. And we wish you well in 2023. And thank you once again. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. As always, you can communicate with us. It's Layered on Instagram. It's Layered Pod on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're on TikTok. Or you can email us. It's layeredpod@gmail.com. Thank you so much. And we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much, Rumi and Amanda. Bye.
They will tear you up like a paper toy. Oh.